Hello, good morning. This is Dr. Iftikhar Ahmed Ansari, Department of Political Science, Aligarh Muslim University. Today I am going to talk about the concept of Marxist democracy, and in that I will be highlighting the dictatorship of proletariat. So it's a topic on dictatorship, one of the forms which is interpreted by socialists and Marxists as democracy. So the classical liberal theory of democracy was established against the special privileges of feudalism and monarchy and the church dominance, while Marxian theory of democracy has emerged against the special privileges of capitalist class and its socio-economic and political systems. Now, it is a message for emancipation of working classes. Now, when Marx says democracy, what does he mean? He simply means that it's not something which is identified with capitalist form of democracy, where he believes that his concept or his view is completely different from what the capitalists say, because their concept is a class concept. So democracy, like state, should only be understood, he said, with regard to the economic substructures or the mode of production of a given society. So democracy is a kind of state. If it is understood as a rule of the people, then its meaning depends on the meaning of and the people which it signifies. So Marxism rejects the concept of pure democracy. Lenin emphasizes that every democracy is a class democracy. And since democracy is nothing but a form of the state, which is essentially a class organization, so the working class democracy is also a class democracy. It is meant to serve the interest of the working class people. In a communist societies where there will be no classes, no state, there will not be any democracy too. Though in a communist society, democracy as a form of political system will definitely not be there, but then its value, the democratic value, will always remain in that system. Now, if we talk about the meaning of democracy for Marxism, the Marxism understands democracy as a system of values and a form of society. Among democratic values, it gives importance to economic equality, social justice, socio-economic liberty, participation of people in overall affairs of the society, and maintains that where there is economic exploitation, democratic values cannot flourish. So democratic values can only be established by abolishing private property and through social ownership of means of production. Democratic values cannot be realized in a society where the majority of the people, that is the working class, is exploited by the minority class of property owners. So Marxism maintains that in a communist society, democracy will wither away as a political system, but democratic values and democratic processes will flourish. So democratic values are those social values which are required for an all-round development of social man and which can only be made available in a communist society. Communist society will be a society of peace and order. It will be a classless and exploitation-free society. There will be no state, no democratic political system, and the social man will be free to have self-realization and self-fulfillment. Marxism does not regard democracy merely as a political system, but it accepts it as a process of a system. Now, he further elaborates, saying that democracy is a form of the state. As every state is a class state, so also is democracy. So socialist democracy is democracy for the working class. It is the dictatorship of proletariat. Now, in such a political system, all the levers of power are vested in the organized revolutionary working class, which uses political power to abolish private property. Now, generally speaking, dictatorship means totalitarian regimes, and it is said that it is the worst kind of anti-democratic government and people hate it, but Marxism views democracy and dictatorship on the basis of classes and maintains that in a class-divided society, government is both democracy and dictatorship. It is democracy for one class and a dictatorship over another class. Thus, the important question is, for which class is the political system democratic and for which class it is dictatorship? A political system which is democratic for the exploiters will be dictatorial for the exploited class, the workers and the peasants. So there is nothing like pure democracy or pure dictatorship. In bourgeois democracy, there may be tacit dictatorship by controlling public opinion through mass propaganda and by maintaining a facade of democratic institutions, or open and naked dictatorship like fascism. So the reality of every political system in the final analysis can be judged only by its class basis. Democracy and dictatorship are two aspects of a political system. Now, talking about the real democracy, Karl Marx says the dictatorship of the proletariat is the real democracy because it means a political system or a state as a ruling class. Now, it is the naked rule of working class over the property owners. Defining it, Lenin said that it is a state which recognizes the subordination of minority to the majority, that is, an organization for the systematic use of force by one class against the another, by one section of the people against another. In 1961, the Communist Party of Soviet Union defined the dictatorship of proletariat as a dictatorship of overwhelming majority over the minority. It is directed against the exploiters, against the oppression of the peoples and nations, and is aimed at abolishing all exploitation by man to another. The dictatorship of proletariat expresses not only the interest of working class but also those of all working people. Its chief content is not violence but creation, the building of a new socialist society. Thus, it's a new kind of democracy. Its basis is the working class, which is the majority class. Now, talking about the necessity of such a dictatorship, which is, according to Karl Marx, is real democracy. So, dictatorship of the proletariat is needed to preserve the political victory of the working class after the violent socialist revolution. It is indeed to abolish, he says, the private property and the capitalist economic system and establish a classless society and socialist economy. Its establishment is closely associated with the socialist revolution. After the socialist revolution, though political power is captured by the organized working class, the capitalist class and its socio-economic system does not become extinct. So, private property, capitalist economy, its culture, its ideology, its social base, bureaucracy, army, it remains and resists the authority of the working class state with full force. So, after the overthrow of political power, bourgeois class becomes ferocious like a wounded lion and tries to sabotage the whole socio-economic and political system. Now, to meet this challenge of the frustrated capitalist class to abolish private property, the working class needs the dictatorship of proletariat, the working class state. The working people need the state only to suppress the resistance of the exploiters, and only the proletariat can direct this suppression and can carry it out. Now, talking about the methods which will be employed in crushing the opponents, the proletariat and their dictatorship, it talks about using a socialist revolution as a means under the leadership of organized working class party. Now, for its establishment, the bourgeoisie state machinery must be destroyed and new working class state machinery must be set up. Marx and Engels, they wrote, the working class cannot simply lay hold of the ready-made state machinery and wield it for its own purpose. In 1871, after the incident of Paris Commune, Marx, in a letter to Kugelmann, wrote that the task of proletariat revolution is no longer, as before, to transfer the bureaucratic military machinery from one hand to another, but to smash it. This is the preliminary condition for every real people's revolution on the continent. Similarly, Lenin wrote, the proletarian revolution is impossible without the forceful destruction of the bourgeoisie state machinery and substituting it with a new one. So, in order to establish the dictatorship of proletariat, the bourgeoisie state machinery must be destroyed, and for this, the socialist revolution is necessary. The suppression of bourgeoisie state by the proletariat state is impossible without a violent revolution. In this way, the working class state should and cannot establish without a socialist revolution and simply by peaceful means. Now, talking about the nature of dictatorship that will be established in this new democracy of Karl Marx, we find that dictatorship of proletariat is now a new class state. Now, the state struggles with the classes struggling and does not appear under the dictatorship of proletariat. It merely assumes a different form. If a democracy of and for the working class, and it is a dictatorship over the property owning class, the object of the dictatorship of proletariat is not to perpetuate the exploitation by maintaining class division of society. Rather than its object is to finish the exploitation forever by finishing the class division of society, by establishing social ownership of the means of production. State power is used by the working class to build up a socialist production system. The nature of bourgeoisie democracy and socialist democracy is the same. Both are the instruments of a class, both are the instruments of repression. But there is a fundamental difference in their class character, and the difference consists in the fact that till that existing classes, states have been dictatorship of exploiting minority over the exploited majority, whereas the dictatorship of the proletariat is the dictatorship of the exploited majority over the exploiting minority. So the dictatorship of proletariat also aims at unity in the society, but this unity is not anticipated as in bourgeoisie democracies by mutual cooperation and harmony of different classes. It aims at bringing unity by abolition of classes. The dictatorship of proletariat is not a perfect democracy, and according to Marxism, democracy is a form of state, so it has a class character of its own. Marxism does not believe in the concept of pure democracy because rule of all over all is self-contradictory. The dictatorship of proletariat cannot be a complete democracy, democracy for all, for the rich as well as for the poor. However, in a communist society where the state will wither away, a democratic ideal society will come into existence, and democracy as a political system will be non-existent, but democracy as a value of life will very much be present. Now, till such time as there is a state, it will be a class state and it will be a class democracy. Now, talking about the duration of this dictatorship of proletariat, it was found that so far as the dictatorship of proletariat cannot remove the last vestiges of capitalism, it will keep on functioning. It will not exist forever, and here, like anarchism, Marxism believes in a stateless society. However, the difference between the Marxism and anarchist position has been discussed, and it can be found that the dictatorship of proletariat is transitional state which is required only during the transitional period changes from capitalism to communism. Now, once a classless communist society has been established, the state will become redundant and the state will wither away. Now, Engels wrote, so long as the proletariat still needs the state, it does not need in it the interest of freedom, but in order to hold down the adversaries, and as it becomes possible to speak of freedom, the state as such ceases to exist. So the dictatorship of the proletariat is not to be a perpetual state, it is a transitional state. When we look at the objectives that will be fulfilled in this dictatorship of proletariat, the very first is that of abolition of the private property, and then to destroy the remnants of bourgeoisie, its culture and ideology, and to crush the resistance of the overwhelming exploiting classes, to abolish the classes and to create the necessary condition for the establishment of communist society. Now, its object is to build a socialist economy through social ownership of means of production. Now, summarizing its objects, Stalin writes that the dictatorship of proletariat is brought into being for the purpose of firstly crushing the resistance of the overthrowing exploiters and consolidating the achievements of the proletariat revolution, and secondly carrying the proletarian revolution to its completion, that is, carrying the revolution to the complete victory of socialism. The dictatorship of proletariat functions on the basis of democratic centralism, that is, the function which is emphasized in making policies of principles of centralism is followed and advises it flows from bottom to the top. In execution of policies, the lower Soviets are given full participation, and the relationship of higher and lower Soviets as well as those of party units are built upon democratic principles. All the higher bodies are elected by the lower bodies, and the method of democratic centralism is much better than the method of bureaucratic centralism which operates in the liberal democracies. Now let's talk about the main features of dictatorship of proletariat or the socialist democracy, which can be enumerated as agenda. Like every democracy, it's a form of state, and like every state, it's a class state. So it's the state of a working class. It is the working class organized as political power. Now, if we find that this is rule of one, that is the majority community or majority of people, that is the working class, so they believe the second feature is that it has a one political party, and that one political party alone should be allowed, and one political party is alone responsible for its benefit. So if there are two or more parties of one class, then it is believed that it is only to deceive the people. The dictatorship of proletariat is an extension of the socialist revolution. So it is established by socialist revolution for fulfilling its aims and for checking the counter-revolution by overthrowing the exploiting class. Class struggle exists even in the rule of dictatorship of the proletariat, but the form of the class struggle changes, since the political power is vested in the hands of the working class, which uses it to finish the exploiter and the exploitation forever. Another feature is that because working class is always in majority, it is the rule of majority over the minority, that is the capitalist class and other exploiting classes. It's a democracy for the workers and a dictatorship over the capitalist and other exploiters. Further, the feature that we distinguish is that it is not a democracy of the whole people, nor it can be so, because it's a form of state and has a class basis. It is established through the socialist revolution under the leadership of organized working class. So it destroys the bourgeoisie state machinery and creates a new state machinery for furtherance of its objectives. Now the state here is transitional one, and it is indeed only during the period of transition from capitalism to communism. The main objective of the state is to fulfill the objectives of the socialist revolution, that is to finish the class division of society, create socialist economic, cultural, moral and ideological system, and to reorganize the society as a whole. Now, in its functioning, the state gives maximum opportunities of participation to the working class through its organizations. The functioning of the political system is simplified, and the ability of the working class is increased through education. Now, when we look at the differences, and we find that Marxism maintains the bourgeoisie democracies are bourgeoisie's dictatorship, and the socialist democracies are the dictatorship of proletariat. So in a class divided society, every political system is a democracy as well as dictatorship democracy for one class and dictatorship over the other class. So the socialist democracies emerge through socialist revolution under the leadership of working class against the bourgeoisie state production system, culture, morality and ideology. So we find that the difference is that bourgeoisie's democracies emerge through the revolutionary struggles of the bourgeoisie against the feudal, socio-economic and political order. Then the economic basis of socialist democracy is the socialist mode of production, which is based on social ownership of the means of production. The economic basis of the bourgeoisie democracy is the capitalist mode of production. The economic basis of the socialist democracies is the socialist mode of production, which is based on social ownership of the means of production. The economic basis of bourgeoisie democracy is the capitalist mode of production, which is based on private ownership of the means of production. Then further, the difference is that the socialist democracies are the rule of majority over the minority, because the working class is always in majority. The bourgeoisie democracies are the rule of minority class because capitalists are always in minority. Then the objective of socialist democracy is not to maintain the exploitative socio-economic system, but to end the exploitation forever by abolishing private property and classes from society. Whereas the bourgeoisie democracies do not aim at the end of exploitation, however, they are not opposed to incremental changes, piecemeal engineering and reforms. The socialist democracies, they aim at establishing unity in society by abolishing the classes. The bourgeoisie democracies, they want to maintain unity in diversity and are based on assumption that in spite of different classes, equilibrium, harmony and coordination of interest can be achieved. In socialist democracies, though the right to personal property is recognized, the right to private property is denied, and in bourgeoisie democracies, the right to private property is the most sacrosanct of rights that they can have. Further, it is found that in socialist democracies, the working class is given due share in the socio-economic, political and administrative affairs. In bourgeoisie democracies, on the other hand, popular participation is confined to elections only. Further, in socialist democracies, only one political party of the working class is recognized, and it is maintained that one class can have only one party, and they are one-party democracies. In bourgeoisie democracies, there are many political parties representing the different sections of society and their interest. The socialist democracies are not only declared the rights of the citizens, but also work in the direction of making them meaningful. The most important rights granted are right to work, right to education, right to leisure, health, old age securities. In bourgeoisie societies, democracies, on the other hand, though rights are granted by the constitution, but there always remains a lack of essential condition required for their realization. As a result, these rights have meaning only for a few. Then again, we find in socialist democracies, the development of bureaucracy is very much restricted, because due to simplification of administrative procedures, a common man can perform administrative functions, and especially qualified bureaucrats are not needed. So the socialist democracies function on the principle of democratic centralism, whereas the bourgeoisie democracies, they function on the principle of bureaucratic centralism. And the socialist democracies are secular states in true sense of the term, because by developing a scientific outlook throughout the political and ideological consciousness, and by emancipating people from orthodoxy, the new ethical values are created, and religion loses its class basis, as the capitalist class which uses religion for furthering its class interest, and this is suppressed. The socialist democracy is a transitional state, and it is assumed that it will wither away in a classless society. In the socialist democracies, it is also found that there is a great faith in proletarian internationalism, and their slogan is "Workers of the world unite." Now, they strongly oppose colonialism and imperialism, or neocolonialism or neo-imperialism as its present form, and they help all those struggles which are waged against these. So, the socialist democracies have firm faith in socio-economic, cultural and political equalities, but in the bourgeoisie democracies, there are inequalities on the basis of private property, color, caste, nationality and race. So, dictatorship of proletariat has been criticized by liberal writers on a number of grounds, and some of the grounds can be traced here. It is found that it is a dictatorship of one particular class, whereas democracy means government of the people, rich as well as poor. Even the dictatorship of majority over minority, tyranny of majority, cannot be termed a democracy. Secondly, democracy needs plurality of political parties. In socialist democracy, only one party is allowed, and this leads to totalitarianism, because multi-party system or two-party system leaves some possibility for other opinions to be introduced, and they also get an opportunity to be part of the system, whereas the one party removes all such possibilities. Now, in these democracies, opponents are deprived of their right to oppose the rulers. If opponents lack the freedom to criticize the government, then the question is, can there remain a democracy? Then socialist democracy, it aims at crushing all other classes. But in a democracy, no single class can have the authority to crush other classes by force. And democracy ultimately aims at unity in diversity and diversity in unity. Now, political liberties are essentially for the healthy democracy, but in socialist democracies, these are taken away in the name of economic liberties. Then decentralization of power is essential for democracy and its functioning. Excessive centralization in the socialist democracies make democracy a vain hope. Then further, while criticizing this dictatorship of proletariat, we find that an independent and impartial judiciary is an essential condition for democracy. This is not present in socialist democracy. And then we also find that it is not the rule of majority, but only the revolutionary elite rule which is present in socialist democracy. It is not dictatorship of proletariat, rather it's a dictatorship over the proletariat. And the economic and political powers are concentrated in the hands of the state. So democracy and freedom needs their separation. Separation of power is the hallmark of democracy. So in a socialist democracy, elections are not real because people have no choice. There is only one party has to be chosen and elected. So in absence of choices, how can democracy remain relevant? So neither are there political parties nor different manifestos. People are compelled to choose only between the different candidates of one party. Then democracy needs the conflict of different views and ideologies, but in socialist democracies only one ideology is recognized and other views are forcefully suppressed. And in socialist democracies, bureaucracy is increasing and it's highly irresponsible and authoritative in nature. And democracy requires a limited government. In socialist democracy, government's power are unlimited. And the highest elected body, the parliament or the Supreme Soviet, hardly meets for a week or the whole year, and the meeting of legislatures are formal rather than real. Now, in the absence of all these features which make a system democratic, can the proletariat of rule or proletariat rule or dictatorship of proletariat rule, can it be called a democracy? Now that remains a question, but then the Marxists, they believe in calling their system as truly democratic, at least not as a system later on when the state withers away, then democratic values will be prevalent in the society, and for them that is the true democracy. So with that, I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you.